The three great intellectual frameworks that have shaped human thinking about the human condition and their relation to the broad world: philosophy, certainly; religion, certainly; and science, definitely. It's no secret that existentialist philosophy is not very happy with traditional religion, and traditional religion is not very happy with existentialist philosophy. The reason, from the existentialist perspective, that traditional religion is suspect, and in their their view rather, is a force not for the realization of human potential, is that religion, despite its protestation to the contrary, is a dehumanizing force. Now, that's a strong charge, but think about it from the existentialist perspective for a moment. At the center of the human project, the center of what it is to be a human being is, from the existentialist perspective, a strong realization that we are responsible for who we are, that we as individual human beings make choices, that we have the power of choice. Whatever the world throws at us, we can respond to it, make decisions and about what we're going to believe and do autonomously. The power of choice and the responsibility for the choices that we make is fundamental to the existentialist project. Now, of course, the traditional religious framework says that it's about responsibility and moral responsibility, and we should all take responsibility for the choices we make and so forth. From the existentialist perspective, though, that is not something that religions follow through on. I'll give you one prime example of what they have in mind. And that would be the story of Abraham, which we talked about earlier in the semester in the connection with the debates over faith versus reason. Think about the story of Abraham and his attempted sacrifice and his willingness to sacrifice his son Isaac because he believed he was commanded to do so by God. Now, Abraham, of course, is a great hero to traditional religion. He is one of the great heroes for his willingness to kill Isaac, given God's command to him. But suppose we were to follow up on that anecdote. Suppose Abraham had succeeded in sacrificing Isaac. God had not intervened at the last moment to stay Abraham's hand. Abraham had followed through and killed Isaac. And then we go up to Isaac in terms of the social follow-up after and say, Abraham, why did you do this? How could you do such a thing? And so forth. What would Abraham's response be with full authorization from traditional religion? Abraham would say, don't talk to me. I did not make any decisions in this matter here. I am not responsible. I am merely obediently following God's command. If you want to find out what's going on here, go talk to God. God is the one who made the choice. God is the one who is responsible for this. I'm just Abraham, just doing what God told me to do here. Now, that might be overstating it a little bit, but not too much, because what Abraham is doing is deflecting all responsibility for the action that he made. He's not saying that he is the primary agent of choice or that he is the primary agent of responsibility. Instead, it's kicked upstairs to God. And that is a profoundly irresponsible thing from the existentialist perspective to do. And traditional religion then is encouraging us to be like Abraham. All right, Abraham chose to interpret the oracle from the angel a certain way. He chose to believe that this is what God wanted to do. He chose not to ask God any questions. He chose to tell Isaac to get up in the morning. He chose to take him up to Mount Moriah. He chose to take the knife, and he chose to make the thrusting gesture toward Isaac. All of those things were things that he did as a human being, and he should, as a human being, take full responsibility for them. By encouraging people to abdicate all of that responsibility, we're abdicating the core of our humanity, and thus traditional religion is, from the existentialist perspective, often deeply dehumanizing. Okay. Now, What about, though, other institutions like science? There are many people in the modern world who are not particularly upset with the death of God. They've managed the transition quite smoothly. In fact, they might be quite happy, right, with the death of God. They will see the death of God as a liberating force. Finally, we can put religious superstition behind us. We can get on with the project of actually scientifically figuring out how the world works. So why don't we, as existentialist philosophers, embrace the achievements of modern science? And science will brag quite proudly of all sorts of accomplishments over the course of a relatively short few centuries of effort here. Well, for two reasons. The existentialists also think that science as an intellectual institution is as dehumanizing to the human condition as religion traditionally has been. Think about the fundamental commitment that science makes, which is the commitment of reason. Science says, let's put everything to reason. But reason from the existentialist perspective operates formulaically. It says, if you take these facts, there's only one right interpretation of the facts that is possible. If you take these two numbers, here's the right way to add numbers, this is the right way to multiply numbers, and so again, there's only one right answer. And so what we end up with from the existentialist perspective is science telling us, dictating to us that there is one right answer and we really have no choice in the matter. We have to conform to what science's one answers are. So from the existentialist perspective, science with its commitment to reason is going to dehumanize us ultimately by taking any choice, any commitment out of the equation. There's just going to be one right answer and one right formula, one right method, and we all have to, in effect, in lockstep, do what the scientists tell us to do. And that's on the epistemological side of the science equation. If we look at the scientific metaphysics, the science project is driven by the commitment that the world is governed by cause and effect. And in almost all of the major versions of cause and effect prevalent in the modern world, they end up being forms of determinism. We saw this last time in behaviorism, that behaviorists argue that human beings are ultimately conditioned by their environments. So again, there is no freedom, there is no dignity, there is no ultimate responsibility for who we are. So if the behaviorist version of humanity is correct, well, then we are dehumanized. And the behaviorists like B.F. Skinner are quite explicit about that. We have to get past these primitive superstitions about human freedom and human dignity and so forth and realize that all human beings are conditioner and our job is just to condition them as intellectuals. Well, if we have no freedom, then we do have no dignity, but then of course that then is science stripping away our humanity. And now the biological forms of determinism from the existentialist perspective are no better. Those are just going to reduce us to animals who are operating according to instinct, but if we're just operating according to animalistic instinct as well, then again we have no freedom, we have no choice, we're not responsible for who we are. Science dehumanizes us once again. So science's reliance on reason, science's commitment to cause and effect, those are profoundly anti-human enterprises, or at least suspicious intellectual enterprises from the existentialist perspective of trying to find human freedom, human responsibility in what might very well be a meaningless world.